Hi, this is Tony Tumble. We are talking Brie de Meaux Masterclass. Brie de Meaux. Brie de Meaux is one of the very great cheeses. It's one of the European nobility of cheeses, up there with Gorgonzola and Stilton and Cheddar and Gruyere, the ones that are household names around the world. Now, there is a first Brie, and that is the Brie de Meaux. Brie de Meaux is is on the right-hand side of Paris as you look at France, maybe 20 kilometers out, and they've been making cheese there since the 700s. 774, there was a Emperor Charlemagne, who's one of France's sort of great sort of military figures, and he is eating it and he says it's awesome. And in 1815 we have another emperor in Bonaparte, and we've got a lot of people from all around Europe, and they agree that a big cheese competition. Brie de Meaux again comes out as this king of cheeses. In fact, that is what they name it. And it was in the 1970s, the 1800s, when the advent of the Brie box, that sort of wooden box thing that camemberts also come in, that allowed these cheeses to be transported. Because Bries, as it turns out, are quite big. They're about 36 centimeters in diameter. That's bigger than my head. And they are flat, and they are about 2.8 to 3 kilos. So they're big cheeses. They're giant camemberts, but they're not thicker. Okay, they still say that 3 to 4 centimeters. We'll come to that in just a second. So let's have a look at one. Let's get cheese cam up here, have a little slice here. So here we can see a Brie de Meaux. This cheese has a white Penicillium camemberti exterior. Let's bring it out with me. And this deep, well, relatively deep paste in the center that can be fully broken down, as this one is. And this one has still got a little chill in it, so it's still quite rigid. But if this was warm, it would be dripping off the end there and drooping down towards the table. And you can see by the way this cheese has sort of been treated by me, that it's got a very soft texture. So let's cut a bit off and see what it's like. So I'm going to break it apart here. Let's get a slightly softer bit there. Right. So that's what Brie curd looks like. Okay. Now, as you can see, it's not liquid per se. It's elastic. Now, Brie in some circumstances can go very soft, but most Brie makers hold the moisture to the point where you get this gooiness, which makes it very easy to use, very to serve, and very tasty. Brie is a 50-day cheese, give or take. They'll make it in the first couple of days. They'll start growing the mold, the Penicillium candidum, also known as Penicillium camemberti, across the surface. And if you go into any of the cheese makers, it looks like it's snowed. The rind is quite white, and the filaments of the mold, which you will see flattened, the ones that you would come across because they've been boxed and packaged, when they're naturally in the mouth, they dome up. It's like it's snowed on top. Very cool. So between 25 and 50 days, they evolve into the cheeses we know. And let's give that cheese taste a profile. The Brie de Meaux I think of as a woodland flavored profile. We're still getting that high umami from the white mold, which breaks down that acidic early curd that's come out of the dairy, and it breaks it down to a more savory, wetter cheese. And that savoriness comes to the point where it exceeds the acidity, and the acidity will drop right back. And acidity should not be a characteristic, at least of mature and young Bries. It can build up towards the end. Salt, there'll be significant salt. Not salty, but you'll feel it as it supports the umami. And there won't be much sweetness. You'll get the taste of the cream, which can feel sweet because milk has that kind of sweet thing. So but it's that real taste only of that sort of dairy sweetness. In the mouth, you can get a range from butter to cream and all sorts, and some sort of baby sick moments at the end of its life. But it's dominated by sort of a creaminess. That's where we're at. And people use that word cream to describe Brie because it has the cream in character and the cream in texture and the cream in flavor. Sometimes, do you get the little hole? Yes, you do. That's part of the secondary fermentation as the cheese gets older. And that secondary fermentation produces both water and carbon dioxide in the cheese, which accounts for the increasing gooiness and runniness of the cheese, but also little holes that you see, particularly towards the center. In terms of the other flavors, the bit that sets Brie apart from its sort of white mold cousins, this is where that woodland flavor element comes in. You will get mushroom, but it'll feel like woodland mushroom, not those button mushroom kind of things. You will get brassicas, but you'll get also things like wet leaves, maybe wood, straw is very common, and earthiness is very common. And in older cheeses, you will get ammonia. You won't get floral notes. You won't get floral notes. You might get some sort of grassy notes in some cheeses, but not typically of the Brie de Meaux. You might get them more in interpretations of bries in other parts of the world. Mouthfeel, gooey, fatty. Let's get some into my mouth and taste it and give it a good squeeze. So you get to feel that. You get to feel that. But you also taste the texture of the rind. Now, the rind when it's young, your teeth will go straight through it. As the mold just parts, it's just a gentle mushroom feel. As you get older, as this one is, and it's delicious, this cheese, by the way, you'll begin to almost it's not so much a crunch, but you're pushing through it like dry cardboard. Whereas earlier you might think of it sort of like a soft cardboard or paper. This becomes like a dry part and begins to get stuck in your teeth. And you begin to get that real taste of the mushroom lingering as the teeth hold the rind, but not the curd. And that flows back over your mouth to complement the cheese. I like that very much. This is a cheese that's extremely practical, used in all sorts of ways in sandwiches and used throughout France. But it's very popular with things like cranberry in sandwiches here in the UK. Does it cook well? Yes, it does, but not really. You want to use on pizzas, that kind of thing. So lay it out, let the rind be a part of the character. But if you're looking for that cheesiness, there are other cheeses. This one you really only want if you want that shape of the camembert, shape of the brie on the cheese, on that kind of thing. So as I said, it's a 36-37 centimeter wide cheese, sort of a big puck, basically, a big flat puck. And the curd will break down over time. Different cheesemakers will have different thicknesses. D'Angers, slightly thicker, Bruxelles, a bit thinner, and there are other cheesemakers. So that's it. Let's have a quick chat before we move on to other things about what variants there are. Well, there are two other bries from around Paris, two famous bries. They're quite different, but sometimes get confused. Brie de Nangis and Brie de Meaux, both slightly smaller, made in different ways. You won't confuse the two if you saw them together, but know for yourself that they're very different. There is one other brie that turns up in Meaux. It's called Black Brie or Brie Noire, where they take a cheese and they age it until it's hard. It's hard. And that cheese is like, you'd have to cut it and grate it. And the cheese goes very, very dark brown and almost caramel color. Very rarely seen outside Meaux, but if you do go there, give it a go. Very cool. Outside of France, they are imitating the king of cheeses all the time. I'm going to have a little piece. It's just too tasty. And so you get it all made. Lots of bries made across UK. The word brie is not protected. Okay, so it's not protected. So anybody can call it. They can call it Stilton brie if that's what they had in mind to do. It'd be silly, but it could be done. There's nothing to stop them. Generally, people do not make bries that are the full 3 kilo. They're unwieldy. They're difficult. Something called a petit brie is a small one, or a brie de Meaux, which is about that size, about 1 kilo. Very practical, much more common. But some people go all the way and make camemberts and call them bries because you can, and that's quite good. So all over the world it's made now, but the first and the greatest for 1,300 years is the Brie de Meaux of Meaux outside